What's going on, you guys? So, I'm back reading this story again, chapter 3. But before I get started on this book, I just want to make a couple updates. One, my boyfriend just recently broke up with me, but we're okay, we're still on good terms, which is good to me, because I like having him around. He's like my best friend. And the second is I found a couple creepypasta Christmassy stories that I want to read. After this book is done, I have to read through those creepypastas first. So I'm going to be reading through those myself, and then if I deem them worthy of being read aloud, I will gladly read them. And I really enjoy creepypastas. They're like so cool. I love them. Jeff the Killer is my favorite creepypasta, by the way. So, with that said, time to get back to this book, chapter 30. I'm so excited. Oh shoot. I just had to get my drink, because I know my throat will be a little bit parched. So, that's it. Let's get back into this. Great view, Gabriel said, tipping his beer bottle toward the darkness beyond the deck that wrapped around his brother's house. During the day, the side of the mountain was visible. But now there was only the outline of trees and the starry sky above. A little light spilled out from the house, enough for him to make out the man sitting next to him and the railing of the deck. But beyond that was only the night. Dinner had been more comfortable than he'd expected. Critter had done most of the talking. He'd asked a few questions, then gone on about his day and his friends. He was a good kid, Gabriel thought, well-adjusted and friendly. Felicia had kept the conversation going as well, but she'd been carefully watching Gideon, as if concerned this was all too much for him. After the meal, she shooed the brothers out of the kitchen to get caught up. They'd come out on the deck, where it was cold and quiet. I like the night, his brother said. Gabriel thought of all the skylights in the house. He only knew the broad brushstrokes of his brother's imprisonment, but suspected he'd been held somewhere indoors. It made sense to want to see as much sky as possible after that. He sipped his beer, conscious of the constant throbbing in his hand. Later, when he was ready for bed, he would take something. Over the counter only, he amended, thinking that Noelle would mock him if she knew. Sweet setup, he said. You've done well. I got lucky. I didn't plan to settle here when I came to visit. Hell, I wasn't planning to stay anywhere. But then I saw the radio stations for sale, and I figured I might as well give it a go. Because you knew so much about radio. Gideon grinned. I learned I like what I do. Oldies? Gabriel shuddered. Why? It's real music. Not everyone wants to listen to LL Cool J. Then they're missing out. Carter prefers my music over yours. His brother leaned his head back. You're guessing. Maybe, but I'm right. Everyone has flaws. His brother turned toward him. He's impressive, isn't he? Yeah, I want to take credit, but I can't. Gideon admitted. It was all his mother. She did better than I ever could have. Then she got sick. That forced him to grow up fast. Does he talk about her much? Some. Felicia's fine with it. She encourages him to make sure he has her picture around and that he tells stories about her, keeping the memories fresh. She's great too. Gideon nodded. I can't explain why she loves me, but she does. She's fiercely loyal, determined. When I was ready to give up on being part of a family, she wouldn't. She was willing to take Carter and raise him herself. He sounded impressed and a little in awe. I didn't want to let her in, but I couldn't help myself. And once I stopped trying to fight her, it was easy to admit how much I loved her. Gabriel understood the concept of family. He'd been in one, had friends with families. He got that people loved each other. Some bonds couldn't be avoided, but romantic love? It wasn't worth the trouble. Life was tedious. It could be over in an instant, so why bother? You've come a long way, he said instead. I don't think I could make it. I didn't think I could make it, Gideon told him. Excuse me, but this damned town healed me. I can't say how, but it did. I started to get involved, he chuckled. There are festivals practically every weekend. Wait until you see how they celebrate Christmas here. It's an eye-opener. He turned to his brother. I know you only came because you got injured, but I'm glad you're here. Gabriel was having trouble keeping up. As a kid, Gideon had been open and friendly, but his time in special forces had changed him. The adult Gideon he knew was a taciturn soldier, a man who would rather cut off his right arm than discuss his feelings. Yet here he was, talking about belonging and love and connection. I should check the back of your neck for some kind of pod, he mumbled. Gideon laughed again. I haven't been taken over by aliens. I'm who I always was. Before everything else happened, his humor faded. Sometimes it's hard, but Carter and Felicia are patient with me. I get through. Which sounded rational, Gabriel thought. Not like his brother, but healthy. What happens next? He asked. His brother took a swallow of his beer. We survived the parents' visit. Something Gabriel didn't want to think about. How long will they be here through Christmas? They have a vacation rental in town. They won't be living here. That's something. He couldn't take too much of their old man. How you feeling? Gideon asked. Gabriel was about to point out that not everyone wanted to share at this meeting when he realized his brother was looking at his hand. It hurts. What happened? Gabriel settled deeper into the chair. A bunch of 19-year-olds got drunk. It always starts that way. You know it. My patient and his buddies got in a fight and one of them went through a plate glass window. They drove him directly to the hospital, which saved his life. There was a large piece of glass, and I forgot I didn't have superpowers and pulled it out barehanded. The move had been stupid, he knew it, and everyone in the ER had known it too. 1 second, he'd been a rational doctor doing what had to be done to save his patient, and the next he'd been spurting blood everywhere. Gideon raised his bottle. We all have moments. Not like that. He'd tried to keep working on the teen, but there was no way. His team had stepped in and another doctor had seen to the kid. Gabriel had stabilized his own bleeding until the crisis was over, and he could be looked at without endangering anyone. Unfortunately, he'd lost more blood than anyone had realized. I ended up having to be admitted myself, he grumbled, and then swore. What was I thinking? You weren't, his brother reminded him. You were reacting. Not well, and not in the right way. There was no point in reliving a past he couldn't change. I was lucky. There's no permanent damage. It hurts like a son of a bitch. My CEO told me it was time to go home on leave, so here I am. Otherwise, he would have worked through the holidays like he did every year. He always volunteered to stay so others could be with their families. This time he hadn't had a choice. I'm sorry you got hurt, but I'm glad you're here, Gideon told him. You want someone to take the pressure off with Dad around. That too, although I figured we can throw Carter in his direction. From what everyone tells me, grandparents can't resist grandkids. An interesting plan. You're not worried about what the old man might do to your kid? Gideon smiled. Nope. Felicia will protect him. She's tough and fierce. I wouldn't go up against her. Good to know. Then I'll stay out of her way. Just don't threaten Carter and me and you'll be fine. Oh, I guess the dog falls under that umbrella now. Gabriel started to say something, but the word umbrella reminded him of the woman he'd met earlier. Noelle, who'd been willing to defend her friend's house with nothing more than bravado, and an umbrella. He was glad she'd seen the error of her attack. Had there been a real intruder, she would have been in trouble. But he'd been no threat, and he had to admit she'd been an unexpected distraction. For a moment, he allowed himself to wonder how his evening would have been different if she'd been the one sitting out here with him instead of his brother. He grinned. For one thing, they wouldn't be so far apart, and they sure wouldn't be talking. What are your plans for after the holidays? Gideon asked. Staying in? By in, his brother meant the army. I'm sorry, I always go ahead. Right there. By in, he meant the army. By in, his brother meant the army. His smile faded. I don't know, he admitted. He'd always planned to stick around long enough to get his 20 years. He would still be young enough to move into a regular job at a hospital, but lately he wasn't sure he wanted to or could. It was the flights, he thought grimly. Those years of shepherding injured soldiers from Iraq and Afghanistan. They were in no position to be moved, but needed the more intense care only a permanent military hospital could provide. So they were patched up and flown out. He and his team spent the hours dealing with one crisis after another. The conditions were cramped, the patients critical, space and weight limited the equipment. When he hadn't been on the flights, he'd been working in field hospitals. Those on the front lines suffered from PTSD, while those who cared for them battled compassion fatigue. Watching the endless parade of injured continually fighting against impossible odds without ever knowing who lived and who died left a person drained. Even his rotations to the hospital in Germany didn't provide much relief. Gabriel didn't know that was where he was now, exhausted and empty, which increased the likelihood that a person made mistakes, and he had the hand injury to prove it. He needed to get away. His brother's invitation had provided a place. Going to spend time with the family at the holidays required no explanation. The door to the house slid open. Felicia stepped out into the night. She crossed to Gideon and placed her hand on his shoulder. He put his fingers on hers. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, her voice quiet. I wanted to give the two of you plenty of time to connect. A strong relationship between brothers would be beneficial to each of you, and it would provide Carter with a view of how siblings interact. Gideon smiled. How could I have resisted you? Felicia smiled. You didn't, at least not physically. It was your resistance at giving your heart that was the cause of your delay in admitting your feelings. I'm glad you're more open now. We're going to have children, and I want Carter to be comfortable as a brother, but also a member of the family. I don't want him to worry he's being pushed out. Which is not what you came out to tell us. No, your parents just called. Gabriel felt the tension in his shoulders. Giving us an ETA? Felicia nodded, looked at him. Yes, they're so excited about meeting me and Carter that they decided to drive straight through. They're only an hour or so outside of town. Excuse me. She returned her attention to her husband. I knew you'd want to mentally prepare for their arrival. Gideon's humor faded. He was on his feet in a second, already moving toward the far end of the deck. About 15 yards away, he stopped and turned back. Gabriel realized the need to bolt. He was feeling it too. Unfortunately, he didn't have anywhere to go, although he remembered seeing a couple of hotels in town. No, he told himself, he wouldn't leave tonight, but the morning was a whole other matter. The Boylan family could trace their service roots back to the Civil War. Each generation of Boylan men enlisted. They weren't officers. They were never famous for their exploits, but they gave to their country and had the medals to show for their courage. Gideon had wanted to be a soldier from the time he was little, but Gabriel had wanted something else. As a boy, he'd dreamed of studying the world, of visiting great museums and studying other cultures. Gideon had been loud and athletic. Gabriel had preferred reading to playing in the treehouse for their fort their father had built in one of their many backyards. He preferred theater to baseball and debate to football. The summer he and his brother turned 15, his father had taken him for a long hike. When they were alone in the woods, the older Boylan had demanded to know if Gabriel was gay. Gabriel knew he was different from his brother and his father, but there were other guys like him. That does it for this video. I'm really sorry that I didn't get to finish Chapter 4. I'll finish Chapter 4. I'll upload Part 2 of Chapter 4 later today at like maybe 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, or -5 o'clock for GMT. I hopefully said that correctly. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I'm really trying to make this every day. I'm really trying to find different books to read for you guys and not just every week like I try to do in June, July, August, June specifically because I haven't had a phone in months. But anyways, that's enough rambling. I'll talk to you guys soon.